that is balance of payment. Before initiating the very formal discussion of this topic, let's try to inculcate few understandings regarding the very relevance of this topic in your entire economic syllabus. And at the same time, we should also try to gain few information regarding the very approach of this topic's preparation, how this topic needs to be prepared so that you can perform very well in limited time. Be asked in mail, but please wait for a while. And second importance of this particular topic is that this topic has wider application in your entire economy syllabus. But economy's GDP is that much percent. So until and unless you does not have any information regarding the very concept of GDP, then you cannot appreciate that statement. Same type of applicability can also be considered for this topic also. In various different, I can say, type of information related to external sector of Indian economy, there are so many keywords which are actually the very basic concept of this topic. For example, uh, you found a newspaper, and in newspaper you got through you came across a particular statement that India's current account has been in debt last 4 to 5 years. All these informations, as far as these informations are concerned, you cannot appreciate those information until and unless you have information or understanding related to the concept of what? Balance of trade, current account concept. So you must always try to build up your own opinion that it is primarily an prelims oriented topic and it has wider application in your entire economy syllabus. Now second question. As I mentioned that I am not denying the very possibility of questions based on this topic in mains. There can be a question. But main agenda is what should be nature of that question which shall be asked in mains examination based on this topic. Look, UPSC has very defined and a very, I can say, predictable approach of question formulation. If you try to, I can say, visualize or try to analyze those all previous year question papers, then you can easily conclude that UPSC used to follow a very dynamic approach in questions especially related to mains. So what that particular question would be what? Dynamic. And dynamic here means that question can be an analytical study or an analytical comparison, whatever approach of some recent trends related to balance of payment. They will not ask that 100% sure that that question would be analytical study of some recent trends related to BOP. So if go through or if you have thoroughly discussed or studied the current affair of last 1 or 2 years, then whatever questions that would be asked based on this topic, you can easily handle that question. So, on the basis of all those discussions, I must mention here that which current affair study material you need to be follow. It's up to you. Fine, but condition is that that particular study material has to be authentic. I repeatedly mentioned this particular concern. Apart from this current affair, you should also try to of India's current account. They mention a statement and they ask your opinion that whether that statement is correct or incorrect. So if I'm not wrong, the statement was India's current account has been in surplus since last 4 years. And they ask that whether that statement is correct or not. So such type of information that India's current account has been in surplus or deficit, such type of information can be easily fetched from which particular all these contents mentioned in these three references, then you can easily handle any question based on balance of payment. Fine. Last dimension, and after that we will start our formal discussion. Which type of questions will be asked in prelims? Excuse me, ma'am. If possible, please don't. Two type of questions based on this topic. I must make all of you aware here that as far as UPSC examination and its preparation is concerned, never stick over precise data. What it means, you need not to memorize that what has been value of India's export during 2020-21 or during 2019-20. Never try to stick over very precise data. UPSC is not obsessed with such type of precise data. They will not ask any question which demand the information regarding precise data of any concept or event. So how you have to prepare those data-based question or information? You only need to inculcate the very overview of any particular event. I am making this statement specifically for UPSC, not for state PCS. State PCS can ask precise data-based question, but our discussion is not actually in context of state PCS. As far as UPSC examination is concerned, only try to build up overview of recently happened events. What is the meaning of that overview? For example, if I make a few data that India's export value during 2017 was $100 billion. During 2018, India's export value was $200 billion. During 2019, India's export value was $210 billion. So you need not to memorize that what was the value, precise value of India's export in last 3 years or last 4 years. What you need to memorize here, that after looking these data, you need to build up an overview. What would be overview here? That you can conclude that from 2017 till 2019, India's export has been persistently what? Increased. Fine. In between 2017 to 2019, if they make a statement that India's export was in fluctuating trend, then you can easily say that this statement is not correct. So such type of data-based question they will ask in prelims. Please always try to retain this particular opinion in your mind whenever you will prepare this topic. Fine. And second type of question related to BOP, which can be asked by them in prelims, would be concept-based question. Would be concept-based question. So as far as concept-based question, our class discussion and class notes would be more than sufficient. As far as this data-based question, I again want to mention here that questions which are actually data-based should be dynamic in their approach. And in order to handle such questions, you need to focus over which document, which I recently mentioned, economic survey. Fine? So all these are actually, I can say, essential approach which you need to develop as far as the topic of BOP is concerned. Now we are ready to initiate our formal discussion. So we will start the very discussion of this topic with a very basic definition. Please write down first of all. Balance of payment is a financial document or a statement. Balance of payment is a financial document or a statement which records all type of financial transactions, financial international transactions, all types of financial international transactions made by residents of country as well as by government with rest word during a given financial year. Now in this statement, you need to underline 2 to 3 specific keywords which are actually pillar of this statement. First, please underline the word resident. Second, international transactions. Now please have a look over verbal discussion of this particular statement. As you all can easily visualize that any decision-making process of government demands few essential inputs. Here inputs is nothing but I can say few specific type of information. And on the basis of those informations, a specific policy formulation or any specific decision can be taken. And this statement is not only for government but for any other entity as well. For example, if your institution try to take decision that whether a new separate batch of English medium should be launched or not. So in order to take that decision, they need a different type of inputs or information. Which type of information? That what is the number of English medium students in this class or in this organization? Is there economic viability of that separate batch or not? For it, they will try to get information regarding the very fees structure. So on the basis of all those inputs, they can or institution can take decision that whether this separate batch can be launched or not. Similarly, any type of policy formulation process of government demands different type of what? Inputs. As far as policy formulation of government in economic sphere is concerned, government also demands or government also seeks different type of economic inputs or economic information. One specific and very important type of information is actually provided by a specific document that is known as what? Balance of payment. Now let's try to discuss that which type of information this document actually renders to government. So this document gives information regarding what? As you mentioned in your definition, that all international transactions made by residents and government of country, made by whom? Residents as well as government of country with rest what? Work in a given time period. So this statement actually want to convey that in a given financial year, all residents of a country coupled with government of that country has made how many and how much value of international level transactions. And international transactions means what? That transaction should not happen at domestic level. It should not be happened. Example of this international transaction can be, for example, I am resident of India, and if I try to purchase a antivirus software from a company based on USA. So in order to purchase that software, I made payment, whatever value of that particular software would be. So when I made that payment to USA based company, what it means? That I made an international level transaction. So please always try to build up an understanding that any type of domestic or national level transaction does not have any place in this document. Only which type of transactions? International level transactions. Now, the second word of consideration here would be the concept of residence. This word also has its relevance in topic of national income. Fine. So how we will deal this particular concept, that which individual would be treated as a resident of country A or which individual would not be treated as resident of country A. So how you deal and what is your approach regarding this concept of resident? Are you resident of India? Everyone. Why? How I presume that you have economic stake in India? You generate income in this country and you also carry out few type of expenditures. Okay. Any other view? Look, I did not mention word citizen in this definition. If you made this particular word, if you use this word citizen in definition of BOP, then you are making a blunder mistake, first of all. Why? Because it is very possible that citizen of a country would not be a resident of country and vice versa. So how we will handle this particular concept which is known as resident? For it, we will refer the very criteria given by Reserve Bank of India. So please write down that criteria of resident. Partially he made a correct statement, but one more aspect I want to incorporate in that dimension. According to RBI, in order to be considered as a resident of a country, in order to be considered as a resident of country, resident of country an individual must satisfy an individual must satisfy following criteria. An individual must satisfy following criteria. First, he or she should reside in that country. He or she should reside in that country since last 1 year, since last 1 year, or or more than it, and second one, as that candidate mentioned, economic interest or stake, economic interest or stake of that individual, economic interest or stake of that individual must lies in that country only, in that country only. And in bracket, please mention the very demystification of this word economic stake, which means that individual should participate in economic activity as well as should make consumption expenditure within economy of residing country, within economy of residing country. So this is the very criteria of this word resident. And on the basis of all these contents which you recently jotted down, you can easily conclude that it is very possible, please write it down, this dimension also, by changing paragraph. On the basis of aforesaid mentioned criteria, on the basis of aforesaid mentioned criteria of resident, on the basis of aforesaid mentioned criteria of resident, it is very possible, please wait, criteria of resident, comma, we can conclude that, comma, we can conclude that it is very possible that citizen of any specific country would not be resident of that country and vice versa. And delicate example of this dimension would be what? The concept of NRI in context of India. NRI are those individuals who are citizen of that India, but they are not considering as resident of India. So please write down this example also. Example would be NRI in context of India. Apart from it, one other specific dimension of this concept which needs to be mentioned here, that please write down and write through heading, that would be note. Note and dash, please write down. Within the concept of or under the concept of resident, comma, apart from individuals, institutions are also covered or included. Institutions are also covered or included. Are you able to make difference between these two words? Institutions and individuals. Institutions means what? For example, Tata, Reliance, this institutions. So this concept of residence also has its very, I can say, incorporation not only with individuals but also with institutions. So how you will deal that which institution would be resident of India or not? Again, you need to satisfy, you need to, I can say, evaluate these two criteria which we mentioned about resident. That whether that institution is operating in India since last 1 year or not. And second, whether economic interest of that institution lies in India or not. If answer of both these questions would be yes for that institution would also be treated as resident of which country? India. Fine. So these are few, I can say, dynamics or dimensions regarding the concept of resident. Now again have a look over the very definition of BOP which we mentioned. Now picture would be more clearer to all of you. This document of BOP records all financial transactions, international transactions made by government and residents of country with rest other words during a given financial year. Fine. Now please move ahead, and again we will try to inculcate our understanding that as far as this document is concerned, that is called BOP, what is relevance of this particular document for government? And second and very most important agenda of our discussion is that how this document is going to be used to be prepared, how this document used to be prepared by responsible agency. So first of all, we will discuss the very relevance of this document for government. Please put heading, significance of balance of payment, significance of balance of payment, please write down. In context of Indian economy, in context of Indian economy, RBI used to prepare and publish this document, prepare and publish this document at at quarterly and annual basis on behalf of government, at quarterly and annual basis on behalf of government, full stop. Significance of this document can be significance of this document can be well understood through following points, can be well understood through following points. Through following points. First, this statement provides this statement provides different types of essential inputs, different types of essential inputs, different types of essential inputs to government for effective policy formulation. For effective policy formulation. Second one, this document also put forward satisfactory answer of different national and international level challenges, different national and international level challenges related to economy. Anyone who can give their own opinion regarding this second statement? What this statement want to convey? One by one. So how this document gives answer of those challenges which you mentioned? You can also give an example. जो भी example समझ पा रहे हो. हाँ, one by first of all. हाँ. That's a good example. Yes. Very good. You got it. Very good. So the very crux of all these dimensions which you all put forwarded is that since this document incorporates different type of informations related to what? International transactions. So for example, let's say that at a specific point of time, Indian government came across a challenge that our domestic currency is depreciating with very faster rate. So it's obvious that government want to explore the very responsible factor behind this problem, that why domestic currency is depreciating. So in order to fetch out responsible factor behind this problem, when government look at this particular BOP trend of India, then this document provides information that India's import burden has been persistently increased since last 6 to 7 years, 6 to 7 months. And since India's import has increased persistently, it means that India actually and different residents of country will demand external currency. And since external currency's demand has been pushed up in comparison of domestic currency, that is the responsible factor behind the phenomenon of domestic currency's depreciation. So what is the very relevance? That this document provides satisfactory answer to different type of national or international level what? Challenges. Fine? So not only this, there can be different, I can say, multidimensional role in context of, I can say, satisfactory answer providing, I can say, framework of this balance of payment document. Fine? Yes. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly, exactly. Any type of international transaction, and international transaction is actually what? It that transaction which actually made by residents or elements of two different nations. Fine? Or by resident or government of one nation with I can say any other international organization. That transaction would also be treated as what? International transaction. Fine? Uh, Third relevance or third significance, write down, last but not the least, comma, balance of payment document is an instrumental, balance of payment document is an instrumental torch bearer document or guider document, torch bearer document for for possible future possible future policies of government, possible future policies of government in economic sphere, possible future policies of government in economic sphere. Are you getting this statement? That this document also provides clue to government that which type of decision you need to be adopted in future course of time. That's why the very word or phrase torch bearer has been mentioned in this particular document or sorry statement. So these are very, I can say, relevance of this document for government Now our next agenda of discussion would be that how this document used to be prepared, in which approach or in which framework RBI used to prepare this document. Now I would like to create a very elegant background of this agenda which we are going to handle right now. Look, as you all can easily say or perceive that there can be any type of international transaction, or I should also mention this statement in other words that whatever international transactions which are taking place internationally have their multifarious purpose. For example, I am resident of India and I make an international transaction. I just paid an amount to USA based company in order to purchase a service from that particular company. Second type of international transaction can be that government of India borrowed a specific amount from World Bank. That is also an example of international transaction. That transaction has different purpose. So what I want to say here that in a given time period, I can say a very vast number of international transactions would be made in between different, I can say, countries or by country and with rest other words. And all those international transactions have their own specific purpose. Fine. So RBI tried to categorize all international transactions in two different categories by looking their purposes, that with which purpose that transaction has been made. So all international transactions which used to be made by resident or government of country used to be categorized by RBI in BOP under two different categories, two broader categories. One category is known as what? Capital account of BOP. And second category is known as current account of BOP. Now, a very important point of confusion I want to clarify it here. In few books, what you will found that this BOP document would be categorized into three different categories. One additional would be known as which account? Financial account. But I recently mentioned that RBI adopt how many type of categorization? Two. One is capital and second one is current. So I must clarify it here that this very framework of BOP and its possible structure has been propounded at international level by an agency that is known as IMF. Fine. During the decade of 90s, IMF put forwarded a ideal manual, and that manual actually guides that countries or government of different countries have to prepare this document in which manner. Fine. RBI also adopted that manual of IMF, and that manual of IMF said that this entire document of BOP needs to be categorized into how much categories? Three categories. IMF manual said speaks about three different categories. But that manual also had its condition or provision that different country, if they want, then government of different countries can make possible modification in this particular framework as per their own domestic condition or requirements. So what RBI did that, RBI adopted that particular manual but with slight modification. And what was that modification? RBI actually did not follow this provision of third categorization. Rather, how many categorization? Two categorization. Fine. The very transaction of financial accounts were actually placed by RBI under which account? Capital account. Fine. I will recently mention that which type of transaction shall have their place in this account. But as of now, I want to clarify that as far as Indian economy is concerned, the India's balance of payment framework has broader two categorization of current account and capital account. अब कुछ किताबों में अगर आपको ये 3 different type of categorization मिलेगा, so it is very possible that books does not mention the very I can say background of that categorization, so you may get confused. That's why I clearly mentioned here all this stuff. Fine. So we have to take reference of RBI because UPSC explicitly mentioned the subject of Indian economy. So whatever topic we will discuss in this entire syllabus, our reference of discussion would be Indian economy, provisions of Indian economy. Fine. So please put heading, structure of balance of payment, structure of balance of payment, structure of balance of payment, BOP, according to framework adopted by RBI for BOP comma, this document has two broader categorization. This document has two broader categorization. This document has two broader categorization. First, and please you should write all this stuff in diagrammatic manner. So you please draw this diagram. Sorry. Current account and capital account. Please drop your pen and focus over demonstration. Initially, we will discuss this account of BOP. And what is the agenda of our discussion? We have to inculcate the very understanding regarding all those possible international transactions which have their place in which account? Capital account. How we will deal or how we will came to know that which international transaction would be placed in this account. So in order to understand all those dimensions, we need to focus over two basic key terms first of all, and those basic terms are the concept of asset and the concept of liability. These two words also have their, I can say, existence in the topic of budget. When if you have understanding of budget and its structure, then in that discussion also these two words have their role. So first of all, let's try to discuss this particular concept of asset, what it means. Look, asset means any type of resource any type of resource which has its monetary value, which has its monetary value. Monetary value means nothing but a type of, I can say, value which can be considered in the form of currency, 10 rupees, 20 rupees, whatever monetary value that should have, which is actually considering as what? Asset. So asset means any resource which has its monetary value, and third potential criteria of asset is that that resource which is actually considering is asset as asset should have potential to provide or generate profit if it will be used in commercial manner, if it will be used in commercial manner. So these are three different criterias of what? Asset. Any resource which has its monetary value and it has potential to generate profit if it will be used commercially then. So please be cautious again here that I am not making a statement here that that resource must generate profit. It should have potential. It may be possible that in few cases that resource which is treating as asset is not able to generate profit. It may be possible. For example, you all have consensus that this document or this financial instrument which is known as share can be considered as asset for an individual. समझ रहे हो ना? Now, if I dare to ask that why this very concept of share is actually considering as asset for an individual, then very rational behind that particular dimension is that this share has what? Potential to generate profit if it will be used commercially. Commercially means what? When it will be sold out. But can you say that it is 100% true, or in any case the share-like instrument will provide profit in any type of situation or in any case? It also may be possible that their value would be downgraded. So in that case, investor would face loss. So I mentioned here that it should have potential. Fine. Now, all such type of assets which actually satisfy these three criteria can be further divided into two specific, I can say, categorization: financial asset and fixed asset. Fixed, apart from it, there is also third categorization that is called movable asset, but no need to actually land into that third dimension's trouble. I actually mentioned here these two categorization because understanding about these two shall help you to understand the very concept of financial account. Look, fixed asset means those assets which are physically fixed, which physical presence is actually fixed. For example, land, any property. These are two delicate examples of which asset? Fixed asset. Now, second categorization is financial asset. This is a little bit typical. Financial asset refers to any type of financial instrument, any type of what? Financial instrument which has what? Potential to provide profit. I am again mentioning, please write down if you want. Financial asset means any type of financial instrument which has potential to generate profit. These are specific keywords which can be asked in your prelims. financial asset refers to any financial instrument which has potential to provide or generate profit. Now again second question arises here, then what is the meaning of this word? Financial instrument, what actually it means? So financial instrument is nothing but any specific document which has its monetary value. Any specific document which has its monetary value. And it is legally acceptable, but that is not a very prime criteria. I will elaborate it, this dimension. So for example, document is a very vague word. Please write down quickly. Should I discuss? Okay. This word which is known as document, it is a very vague word. If you have any, I can say, class notes, that is also a document. So whether that document would be treated as financial instrument? No. Why no? Because this dimension is lagging. It does not have its what? Monetary value. So instead of that particular class note, if I will put forward different example, and that is the document related to your bank's account, your saving account document, whether that document would be treated as financial asset? Why not? It is also, it has monetary value. If, for example, you deposited 2 lakhs amount in bank, and in return of that deposited amount, banks give you a receipt or that document, and in value of that document is up to how much rupees, that 2 lakhs or whatever amount which is mentioned over that document. So that particular instrument can be considered as what? Financial instrument. Apart from this bank account, as she mentioned, the very document of what? Bond, shares, these can be considered as financial instrument. Why? Because these documents have what? They have their monetary value. It can be changed, it can be uniform, it is not the matter of agenda, but they have their monetary value. Fine? So now please try to build up the very concept of financial asset. Financial asset are financial instruments which have their value and they have potential to provide or generate what? Profit. Clear? So, in this context, now we will again look back the concept of capital account. After discussing the concept of asset, let's take up initially the concept of liability, and then we will discuss the concept of capital account. As far as liability is concerned, please write down one statement. In context of BOP, balance of payment, comma, in context of BOP, balance of payment, word, quote unquote, liability, word, W-O-R-D, word, and quote unquote, liability should be considered as liability to repay other entities, apostrophic S, entities amount other entities amount. Now what this statement actually means. Here liability means what? Here liability word means liability to repay an individual's amount. Now in which case that liability would be generated over you? In which case the liability to repay different individuals' amount would be generated over an individual, when that amount would be taken from that individual with few conditions. And what is the basic nomenclature for that transaction? Borrowing. If you borrowed an amount from an individual, then automatically the liability to repay that amount would be generated over you. Fine. And not only borrowing. Basically अगर मैं चाहता तो यहाँ पे liability word का meaning केवल borrowing ही लिखवा सकता था, but it is not correct explanation, because apart from borrowing there are few specific other examples in which there is the very concept of liability can be justified. For example, if bank is accepting deposit of their customers, in this case that statement have its justification also. So when bank accept deposits of customer, can I say that that amount which has been deposited by customer have ownership of bank or ownership of that customer? Customer, because that is the amount of whom? Customer. So when customer put his or her money into bank, then thereafter liability to repay that amount again to customer has been generated over which element? This bank. That whenever customer will demand his or her deposit or his or her amount, that bank have to repay it. Fine. So here the very concept of liability must be understood only in this sense. Which type of liability? Liability to repay different entities amount. मैं यहाँ पर इसलिए ये word use कर रहा हूँ because this liability word also have its very vast coverage in my different classes. For example, before few months when I was taking class, so soon after discussing this concept of liability, when I raised a question, and question was that I went into a college, I took admission in that college, and in the name of admission I paid a specific amount of fees. Fine. So whether that particular action of fees payment have its relationship with my liability or not? And a student raised his hand and said yes. I asked why. Then he replied me that since he actually referring to me, that since you took admission in college, you are taking service of that college, that's why it's your responsibility or liability to pay the value of that service. Whether he was technically correct in this context? Actually not. The word liability should be understood only in one context. And what is that context? To repay amount of different individuals which you or any other one took for any specific cause. Fine? Apart from it, please don't get confused to relate this word liability in, I can say, different realms. Fine? So, these are two different keywords. I hope it would be clear to all of you. Fine? So now let's over the concept of capital account. Please write down definition. In this account of BOP, in this account of BOP, all those international transactions, all those international transactions, all those international transactions used to be placed or mentioned, used to be placed or mentioned which causes dash first, which causes dash first, either transfer or shifting, whatever you'd like, either transfer or shifting of ownership of an asset, ownership of an asset at international level, at international level, and second one, or that transaction, or that transaction had its influence over, that transaction has its influence over liability of either entity. Either entity. Here this word either entity means what? I am talking about any of those two individuals between whom that transaction has taken place. Either of these two entities. Fine? So please look over these two dimensions. First of all, you always be cautious that I am not mentioning the word and in this particular criteria. Rather I use what? Either and or. What it means? If any international transaction is actually satisfying any of these two criteria, it will be placed under which account? Capital account. If you use the word and instead of or, then you actually, I can say again, made blunder mistake. You always must use the word or for these two statements. Any of these two criteria needs to be satisfied. Any of these two. Fine? And now, what are these two criteria? If you found that due to an international level transaction between two different entities, for example A and B, there is shift or transfer in ownership of asset between A and B. What it means? For example, individual A of India paid 100 CR amount to individual B. That is the example of international transaction, fine. And due to this transaction, the ownership of an asset, that asset was actually what? Land, which was under ownership of whom? B. Ownership of this asset after payment of this 100 crore rupees by A actually shift over under ownership of whom? A. If such transaction of 100 crore shall have this type of influence, then this transaction of 100 crore would be placed under which account? Capital account. Are you getting my point? So, can you suggest me a specific word for this particular phenomenon? Shift in ownership of an asset between two different individuals. It is what? Selling and purchasing of an asset. यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है? एक एसेट को ए क्या कर रहा है? खरीद रहा है बी से. And in return of that, we can also make a reverse statement that B is actually selling his asset to whom? A. So any type of international transaction, now I am making this particular statement little bit, I can say, smoother for you. If any statement, if any transaction causes selling and purchasing of asset between two different individuals, that would be placed under capital account. Clear? Now, can you please suggest me a different word for this phenomenon of purchasing of asset and selling of asset? What a specific word you can suggest for these two phenomena? No, what specific word for these phenomenon can be suggested from your side? Is there any word for these two phenomenons? Satisfied? So investment means what? When this word used to be mentioned for an entity, when it would be say that I invested this much amount. Investment is nothing but the process of capital formation. And capital means what? Please correlate these two words. The word capital and the word asset. I can say that all capitals are a type of asset. When in which condition an asset would be treated as capital? In which condition? When that asset would be used in commercial manner to harness or generate profit, in that case that asset would be treated as what? Capital. For example, I have piece of land, but I am not using it in commercial sense. That piece of land would be treated as asset for me. Fine. Situation when I decided to sold out that land with profit margin of 2 crore for say, in that case now I am using my asset in which manner? Commercial manner. So in that case that particular asset would be also treated as capital for me, and in that case in few books you would also found the word what? Capital asset. Fine. So investment is nothing but the process of capital formation. And when individual will form capital, can I say that individual is actually generating asset for under his ownership? Both statements are identical. Capital formation means asset generation by an individual. So if I spend a specific amount and in return of that I can say expenditure, I generate an additional ownership of additional asset for me, that expenditure would be called what? Investment. So this particular example which I recently mentioned between A and B, in this example can I say that A made what? Of how much rupees? Fine. And B is actually making what? In the name of this investment, he is getting how much rupees? From whom? Now picture is being more clearer to all of you. So in capital account, now again a simplified version of this first condition. Under capital account, any international transaction in the name of investment or disinvestment have their place. Fine. So if example would be cited to in front of you that an individual of Australia and resident of Australia is getting $20 billion amount from different resident of I can say South Africa in the name of selling of a particular share. So that particular transaction would be placed under capital account or not? Exactly, it will be mentioned. Why? Because individual of Australia is getting $20 billion amount due to which particular reason? Because he sold out his ownership of shares to different individual of which country? South Africa. So that actual movement of $20 billion towards individual of Australia would be treated with the name of what? Disinvestment. He get that amount in the name of what? Disinvestment. And for individual of South Africa, which word would be mentioned? Investment. Clear? So in bracket, please write down for statement A. For statement, for condition number 1. For condition number 1, you can also mention attached note. International transaction in the name of investment or disinvestment. In the name of investment or disinvestment, would be mentioned under capital account. Would be mentioned under capital account. And for statement number 2, you can also mention few examples. Transaction in the name of lending and borrowing. Transaction in the name of lending and borrowing. Can anybody please explain me that how this transaction in the name of lending and borrowing will influence liability of related individuals? How it will influence? No, I am not talking about interest. My question is that, for example, if I lended a specific amount to you, fine. So this particular transaction, how I can perceive this transaction over liability of any of us entity? How this transaction is actually influencing liability? If I lended to you, then which individual's liability would be, I can say, increased, of mine or him who borrowed? Fine. And the situation when he repaid that amount to me, the liability which was actually generated over him will again, I can say, what? Diminish. Fine. So lending and borrowing, these two processes have its influence over liability of either of I can say related entity. अब आपको ये समझना है कि किसकी liability इन्फ्लुएंस हो रही है, और यहाँ पे I again want to make it clear to all of you. When an individual will lend a specific amount to different individual, for example, A is lending an amount to B. So in this case, the very concept of liability should be discussed in context of which individual, A or B? Is there any sense of this word for A? No any sense. The word liability has its relation only for which individual? B. When B will borrowed amount from A, liability will be increased. Fine. And the moment when he repaid that amount, the liability which was actually created over him would be diminished. So this word liability has its sense or its justification only in context of which individual? Individual who borrowed, not for individual who lended. Clear? So please write down second example after in that statement only by putting out comma. Transaction in the name of deposit and withdrawal. Transactions in the name of deposit and withdrawal by not by between non-resident customer and domestic bank or resident bank. You can also write in this sense also. Why I use word non-resident customer here? That's the point. Very good. Because the very concept of BOP has its relation only with which type of transaction? International transaction. So these are two different, or I can say broader examples of transactions related to capital account. Now a very famous example which always used to be discussed by any teacher who used to taught this topic of BOP in context of capital account is that if I mention two types of transactions, and it is a very famous example, or I can say debate related to capital account. One transaction in the name of interest payment, right? And other transaction is in the name of repayment of loan. Which transaction will be placed under capital account out of these two? Repayment of loan, but not interest payment. Why? That's the point. Interest payment word here means what? For example, if I try to explain this dimension with the help of example, if A lended 100 rupees to B with 10% interest, it means the value of interest would be how much? 10 rupees? Huh? So interest payment means B is not paying A 110 rupees. He actually is not paying. The word interest payment means B is paying how much rupees to A? Only 10 rupees, only the value of interest. But this liability over B was actually created due to which amount? This principal amount which was borrowed. And until and unless this principal amount would not be repaid, the very liability would not be diminished from B. Fine? So the word interest payment shall not have its any place under capital account. Rather, this word known as what? Repayment of loan has its place under capital account, because repayment of loans means what? B is actually paying not only 10 rupees of interest plus principal amount also, means B has paid how much rupees? 110 rupees to me. Clear? So you should have clear cut, I can say, understanding or demarcation between these two different type of transactions. You can also write this dimension in your notebook. The repayment of loan would be part of capital account. Interest payment does not have its place in capital account. So this was the first broader component of balance of payment, that is known as capital account. Second one is current account. Now second one is current account. Look, it would be considered as a very smart strategy if you attempt any question by utilizing your least effort. Fine? If any question shall be asked that which out of given transaction, which transaction would be placed under capital account and which transaction would be placed under current account, then this type of question shall be dealt by different students in two different manners. Few students will try to incorporate or try to attach the concept of capital account with given transaction, and then they will again try to attach the concept of current account, which we shall discuss in recent course of time. They will deal or they will attach the concept of current account with those different options. Such process will take a very longer time, and it is nothing but your wastage of time. You need to attach only the concept of capital account with given options, and on the basis of that particular analysis, if you will finalize that yes, this transaction would be placed under capital account, then remaining transaction would be automatically placed under which account? Current account, simply. So as far as discussion of current account is concerned, before initiating its formal discussion, I should discuss this trick to all of you, that you first try to attach or first try to think over international transactions, that whether that transaction would be placed under capital account or not, because the very dimension of capital account is limited. Only two types of transaction would be placed under capital account, which we have been discussed. So first try to think over that given transaction, is any given transaction has its relation with either of these two conditions of capital account or not. If any given transaction have its relation with any of the given two condition of capital account, you will consider it as a part of capital account. And if any of the two conditions of capital account would not be satisfied for a given transaction, then what it means? That transaction would not be part of capital account, which indicate that this transaction would be part of which account? Current account. Clear? So this type of trick you need to be followed in examination. It would be a very easy for all of you to pick over transactions that which would be part of capital and which would be part of current account. So please write down first of all definition of current account. This account of BOP, this account of BOP, this account of BOP contains all those transactions, all those transactions, all those transactions, all those transactions, international transactions, sorry, all those international transactions which does not have any influence, which does not have any influence over, which does not have any influence over ownership of an asset, ownership of an asset, as well as ownership of an asset, as well as liability of any related entity, liability of any related entity. different transactions of current account, different transactions of current account are further categorized as different transactions of current account are further categorized as visible and invisible. ऐसे ही diagram बना लो. Further categorized as dash, and this diagram used to be copied by you, should be copied by you. Visible and invisible. Under visible section, transactions in the name of export and import of goods. Export and import of goods. Transactions, international transactions in the name of export and import of goods used to be mentioned under visible section. International transactions in the name of export and import of goods used to be mentioned. And after that, please write down under visible section also data of visible section of current account, visible section of current account, data of visible section of current account are known as balance of trade, are known as balance of trade. Balance of trade. Now we will further clarify this concept of BOT with the help of one example. So any data, or you can also say that all type of international transactions which actually took place in the name of what? Export and import of goods shall be collectively treated as or known as what? Balance of trade. Now if I will try to cite an example over here, let's say that government of India, fine, exported, this is a very important dimension which I am going to mention over here. Government of India exported wheat worth of rupees 50 crore to Australia. Fine. Worth of rupees 50 crore to Australia. Now it is very usual that this goods has to be exported with the help of some specific transportation facility. I assume that this good has been exported from India to Australia with the help of, I can say, ship. Fine. So this transportation facility also demands its service value or not? I assume that in order to transport this wheat from India to Australia through ship, further 1 crore rupees has been spended spent by element of Australia or government of Australia in the name of which service? Transportation service. Now my major question is, if I will ask you that what would be value of BOT, what would be value of BOT for India in this example, whether it would be 50 crore or 51 crore. Are you getting my question? Now please tell. With clear-cut mindset, whether it would be right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Whatever you are saying, you should have confidence that yes, it would be and it is why. 50 crore. How many are saying that 50 crore? It means I assume that rest other has their view that it would be 51 crore. Why 51 crore? Here India is not importing. Okay. Means this is, as per your opinion, this is invisible cost of this export. That means it has to be added in this value. Look, here is a very big debate. That's why I raised this question. As far as the manual given by IMF, as far as the manual proposed by whom? IMF, the parent agency of this concept that we are discussing today, BOP. As far as IMF's manual, value of this wheat export would be, but I again must say that we does not need to bother about the very manual given by IMF. Rather, our reference of discussion would be the very provision adopted by whom? RBI. And as per RBI, the value of particular export would be the value of goods which has been exported, not the value of service with the help of which that commodity has been exported. So answer of the, whenever such type of question shall be asked in examination, your answer would be the value of goods which has been exported or imported, not the value of service. Clear? So this is the case of, I can say, balance of trade, and that was the visible section of current account. Now, under invisible section, which type of transaction used to be mentioned? We can make this particular diagram. Yes, any doubt? Under invisible section, export and import of services, export and import of services, export and import of services, international transaction. I am only mentioning the word transaction over here, but you should perceive it as international transaction. Transaction in the name of profit, interest payment, remittances. Remittances should not be mentioned in this category. Profit or income, and third one is unilateral transfer. Unilateral transfer. Is it visible to all of you? The last row. Unilateral transfer. Example of unilateral transfer would be gift, transaction in the name of gift, donation, grant, remittances, etc. the word unilateral transfer means those transfer or payments in return of which the individual does not get any commodity or service in private sense. They are such type of, I can say, payment which does not fetch any commodity or service in return. Normally, any payment in market has its bilateral dimension or not. You paid from your pocket 10 rupees in at a shop, then shopkeeper in return would provide you a specific commodity or service, whichever you would be wanted. So that payment is actually what? It has bilateral in its approach. Fine. But unilateral transfer are those payments or those transactions which does not have bilateral approach, rather they are unilateral in their nature. And what it means, in the return of such type of payment, the payee, means who paid that amount, will not fetch any commodity or service. Fine? So such type of transactions are known as what? Unilateral transfer. And I also tried to cite few examples over here. You can appreciate these examples in context of this word. Fine? So these are the examples of unilateral transfer. Remittance means a specific amount which used to be sent by an individual who is not residing in his home country. An individual who is actually working out of, I can say, out from his home country, and that individual is used to pay a specific amount to his or her family who is residing in home country, is known as what? A remittance. So you should also know that India is the world's largest recipient of remittances. Fine. So these are transactions which actually are the part of which account? Invisible account of current account. Now I am giving you 1 minute time. Please look over all these transactions and try to think any type of international transaction and try to attach that transaction in either capital or current account. You will find that whatever dimensions which we have been discussed till now, any type of international transaction can be easily placed under either capital account or current account. There would not be any transaction which does not have its place in any of these two accounts. सोचो जरा, किसी भी तरीके का ट्रांजैक्शन आप सोचो, you can easily found that it will be either placed under capital or current account. And if you are facing any problem, then please raise your concern. Just try to go at your home and try to practice, explore few type of transactions from your own thinking and try to fit that transaction in either of these two accounts. So this is the very structure of balance of payment in context of the very approach adopted by RBI. But as I initially mentioned that as per manual proposed by IMF, there is provision of a third category of BOP that is called financial account. Please write down a short note for this financial account. As per BOP manual proposed by IMF, as per BOP manual proposed by IMF, The document has its three components. The document has its three components. The document has its three components, namely, and please write down from your own, by your own, capital account, current account, and financial account. Capital account, current account, and financial account. And write down from next line. Financial account included those international transactions which took place in the name of selling or purchasing of financial instruments like bond, shares, derivatives, etc. In bracket you can also write FDI or FPI. So if any international, I can say, if any institution of USA invested $100 billion amount in share market of India, and that institution of USA purchased, I can say, for example, 20% share of an Indian-based agency, then that transaction would be placed under which account? Financial account. Why? That transaction has been placed in the name of what? Selling and purchasing of a financial asset. Clear? So this is the very dimension of financial account. Please write down one more dimension, one more line in that paragraph only. Within India, RBI usually mention transactions of financial account under capital account component. Fine. So this was the very, I can say, structural framework of balance of payment dimension. Still we have two more dimensions to be covered in this topic, that is the concept of deficit and surplus of balance of payment and their possible implications. If current account is in deficit, then what this dimension or this condition have which type of implication over economy. If your capital account is surplus or in deficit, then which type of implication that condition would have its over economy. And last dimension of this chapter would be few dynamic information related to India's BOP, especially of last 2 years. But in today's class, actually we are running out of time. So I should conclude this class here right now. In our next session, we will try to finish all these remaining stuff. Fine? Thank you.